Hi, my name is Tim Mosier, and this is my final portfolio project. Um, After thinking long about it, I was trying to pick two leaders from two different cultures, and I thought it'd be interesting to take two political leaders, and both started with business backgrounds. So, what I did was I picked his name is Lars Locke Rasmussen from Denmark, um, and the other leader I had was the very, I guess, divisive, dynamic, and whatever you want to say about Donald Trump. So I use these two different leaders from these two different backgrounds. So I guess the background for Lars Rasmussen is was a lawyer, a mayor, conservative party in Denmark, did everything he could to fight for, I guess, a prime minister of Denmark. So that's what he did in his whole time, and he got elected. I think with very little support, but he was a conservative party, but he won this last election. I think it was 2015, 2016, to be the prime minister. But what he did was he was a mayor. He's really insightful, a lawyer, super smart. Went to the University of Copenhagen. So he's always kind of been a leader in his businesses and his law practice. Donald Trump, on the other hand, obviously people know him and his background. Whatever you think of him, the guy was obviously really successful. So I wanted to take all the political side of it, whatever my opinion of him, out and just try to talk about him as a man and as a leader. Really successful businessman. Built, obviously got some money from his father, but he started a business, and they just reading about him was really interesting because he was a smart risk taker. That didn't take a lot of really that risky business things, and he really wanted to make sure he built his dynasty and did that. So to answer the first question, brief background was probably those things I just mentioned. So, overview of the culture. Well, we know what a kind of America is. It's right now it's really one of the most divided countries politically, with the left and the right. So, the culture in America is free, um, taxes, um, really strong military. That the culture of America is. We should all know what that is because we are Americans. But I would say that it's totally different than Denmark, Democrat, for a democratic leadership like what Lars Rasmussen is in charge of. It's definitely social democratic with high taxes for all the different social welfare programs they offer. So totally different, two different cultures. So when you have a leader like Rasmussen in Denmark, I mean, I want to go there someday. I want to. I guess I told you that last one I was going to live there. So that's what I really wanted to study what his background is, and he's kind of divisive in himself because he wants to lower taxes, but still offer all those welfare reforms. And the culture is really accepting of immigrants. Where right now in America, maybe we're more hesitant because we seem to be at war with some things, and obviously Donald Trump wants to talk about building a wall and doesn't really open his borders like this. So two different cultures. I guess the comparison of techniques each to gain power. Well, I think Trump. To speak about Trump first, I think the gain power of his business. I think he obviously took over his dad's business with money, but I think reading about him, it was interesting to see the techniques he used. I think he's really a smart man, but I also think one of the things that he did really intelligently was he listens. And one of the things I said, people question some of the things we could learn about his leadership, and one of the things they said was his decision making. I mean, he really used everything he did as a business deal. He set goals, and one of the things that I was kind of impressed with him about is they said he was really. They don't know if he was narcissistic or not, but he said he was really confident. All right, and he said he loved to work. He works his butt off. So there was a technique he did, and they said one of the biggest things he had was he knew he had a really inept way of judging character. So the techniques that he used to gain power in his business, I think, was that. That's how he grew his model. As he took risks, he goal set and did all those things, and his leadership style definitely was autocratic. I mean, he definitely wanted to step up and make his decision himself. But when you read some of this, when he brings in, like, for example, the black leaders, and he sits there and listens. He listens and listens and makes a decision. So not everyone agrees with his tact because he probably lacks a lot of that, but that's what he did. On the other hand, Lars, his techniques were probably really I would say he's a really democratic leader to a point that he even looked like a laissez-faire leader. And one of the things that I really liked about him, he just takes everyone's insight and gets everybody involved in his decision making. So one of the techniques that he did to become the prime minister is really get everybody involved in his business, his law practice, study things, and get everybody involved in what goals was best for Denmark. So kind of a different approach, but similar. I think the more I read this is they might have taken different approaches, but they both kind of had the same result. So one of the things that Donald Trump did to win the presidency was totally different than what Rasmussen did in Denmark. I think Rasmussen really approached it with just a couple of things like lowering taxes and maybe cutting off some of the immigration, where Donald Trump really was speaking some of the language that maybe people didn't want political correctness and really attack some things that maybe some people wanted in their leader, that they were tired of hearing all the nonsense. So there's obviously a reason why Donald Trump won, and he played it super smart and understood there was a faction of America that wanted him. So he played that really well. So support is how they relate to each leader. I would say in Rasmussen's case, just reading this and reading it over and over, he was such a transformational leader and democratic in his approach. So he got everybody involved. So I would say all the subordinates really followed suit, and because he gets them all involved. Well, Donald Trump, on the other hand, you don't know, because people are, it seems like, getting fired left and right for not being on board. So I think in his business, it seems like if someone didn't work hard and show the same desires and same vision that he had, they were gone. So I think the people that are loyal to him are the ones that are really close, were the ones that did what he said and followed suit and probably believed in what he did. So two different types of comparisons with the subordinates, and how they influence change the behavior of coworkers. I think that's as a leader, you can see that when you read about Rasmussen's law practice. He was again, a caring man, and tried to show and get all his coworkers involved and his peers involved in everything. So he showed that. Well, Donald Trump worked hard. And the way he changed behavior is pretty much, you can see, because there's a big article here about what he can teach us about leadership. Is he a narcissist or is he an innovator? And I think he's a little bit of both. I think he's a little bit of an innovator and a narcissist. I mean, I think he definitely changed his behavior out of fear. And I think people know they're going to fire him if he doesn't do what he says. And I think he works really hard. And I think he challenges and puts really high expectations on people. So, and I think he's, as much as I was surprised about how much he listens, I think he also is obviously an autocratic leader that doesn't have. He's going to listen, make a decision, and if people don't follow suit, he seems like he's going to attack them on Twitter or something else. So he's going to change behavior in those things. So the techniques used by each leader to influence employee motivation, again, I think that's similar. I think Lars Rasmussen influences his followers mostly by his transformational leadership came from mostly getting everybody involved and feeling took ownership. Where I think Donald Trump and a lot of stuff is, obviously, I think he liked to make money in his business. So I think that he gave him probably rewards and offered all sorts of things and all sorts of incentives in that category. When you read about him and his business, he knew what motivated people was money and incentives. But as a president, his leadership style is probably one of how he motivates and influences, employee motivation is again, maybe out of fear. I mean, I think he's a really good, I think he speaks simply and not always right, but I think he speaks to the working man. But I think the way he works with his coworkers and in those people is, I think they're out of fear again. I think they're afraid of him. So, and now self-destructive tendencies, well, you can definitely see what Trump is. I mean, I don't think there's any, when I read this, he's a businessman that has no political experience and no political tact. So I think his self-destructive thing is his Twitter, his emotion. I think he says things off the cuff, and I think he thinks it's probably good that he wants to be that leader that just says what he thinks. But there's always a benefit. There's always a negative to each one of those comments. So I think he's really self-destructive with how he doesn't think and get others involved with maybe before he tweets or something like that. The self-destructive behavior of Rasmussen really, I just think, I don't see a lot of things with that. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to really transform and get everybody involved in it, and he's for the people. And that's the biggest thing. I think right now he's the second command at NATO, so obviously he wants to work with things. A humanitarian aid. He works with us with the fight against ISIS. But mostly he's for the people. So I think he's really trying to figure out the best ways to solve solutions. So I don't think he has a lot of dark characteristics. I think what's really going to get him is his leadership ineffectiveness is going to be probably the way people don't disagree with his politics. I think the analysis of which leadership theory, I think I already said I think Trump is an autocratic leader, autocratic for sure. I mean, he's going to be the guy that's going to do what he says, and he's going to make the decision and do it. Where I think Lars is a democratic leader and a transformational leader. And I think both those guys are probably both transformational leaders, and they both are path goal. They both represent path goal leadership because they both have a goal, and they figure a way to do it. Just different styles, totally different styles. An evaluation of how successful two leaders in their respective cultures and ideas, how they can improve their effectiveness. Well, I think Donald Trump can improve his effectiveness by just being more tactful and more caring and showing more empathy. I think that's the biggest thing that he could do with some of those things, and not getting involved with minute things and little things that a president shouldn't be involved or a leader shouldn't be involved in. I think he needs to rise above things. And the effectiveness of Lars Rasmussen is probably the effectiveness of his policies. I think that's the biggest thing he needs to do. I think he's really a good communicator as well. The people like him. So I think that the biggest respective cultures and that stuff, how to prove effectiveness, is Donald Trump's an easy one. He doesn't need to say things and fight the battles. He knows people, and 50% of the Americans probably don't like him, so he doesn't need to keep outraging them. I think he needs to keep working for the people. And the biggest thing he needs to do is I think he needs to be more democratic. And I would say that maybe if Lars Rasmussen, maybe the most effective thing he can do is maybe be more autocratic at times and make decisions for the country. So, again, I appreciate this. It was a great class, and I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.